This is Chris Barker, Director of Athletics at Southern Connecticut State University on the One Question Leadership Podcast. I just wanted to give a huge shout out to the NCAA Pathway Program, Dee Merritt and Lamar Pottinger, for creating opportunities for people like myself and people of color and underrepresented populations to having opportunities to be directors of athletics. If it wasn't for the Pathway Program, I wouldn't have the opportunity to be with people like Andrew Gavin, who got me into the Pathway Program, people like Sean Frazier, who was one of my mentors through the Pathway Program, who then introduced me to the Pictor Group, who got me into the chair at the Southern Connecticut State University. Thank you, NCAA Pathway Program, and thank you, Ty Brown. Go Owls.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Our guest today is Andrew Goodrich. Andrew is the Deputy Athletics Director over Marketing at Syracuse. Greetings, Andrew. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan.
I appreciate that. It's the second time on, I believe, right? You were at South Florida, I think, the last time we talked.
Correct.
Which was years ago, which is crazy that was almost 4 or 5 years ago.
You blink 3 times and 5 years will pass.
Exactly. You've been there for 4 years at Syracuse and had a number of stops, interns, graduate assistantships, a number of different places. But what I know about you is that you started off out of college working 4 years at IBM.
Correct.
And I know in years past, 70s, 80s, 90s, IBM was one of those places where you get that job, you learn how to be a manager, learn how to be a leader, you learn how to work with people, and you can make a career out of it working at IBM. I wonder about how that was for you, early 2000s, working at IBM. Was it still a place where they kind of helped you think in a certain manner? Or tell me about that experience, those 4 years.
It was easily the best professional experience I ever had in my career.
Okay.
I worked with some of the most brilliant thinkers, engineers, and data architects that one could ever ask to work with. I promise you, the most nervous day I ever have been in my life, more nervous than on my wedding day, was my first day working at IBM.
Yeah.
You go into their corporate headquarters. I worked as a financial analyst and data analyst, and I worked on a floor that had 250 different analysts. And, the size of the company is huge. And, I wanted to, like, as a college athlete, you want to contribute to your team. You definitely want to help the team win. And I ended up going into this behemoth company wanting to find a way to help that team win. And I was blessed to have incredible mentors, incredible teachers. And they really instilled a philosophy, a championship philosophy that I've used at every point in my career, where you just engineer the solution.
Okay. Was that a phrase that they taught you on how to think like that? I mean,
In a sense, yes. Right. Like, I like to use the example of the iPhone. The iPhone is an incredible tool that people use every day.
Mm-hmm.
If IBM decided that they wanted to sell more iPhones or have the best smartphone available, they're the type of people who would do that, because they would sit down and they would say, listen, that is an incredibly difficult thing to be able to do. However, there is a solution. They would engineer it, they'd build a roadmap, and they would figure out how to do it.
Okay.
And then as a manager, you'd have to make that decision. We know how to do it. Here's the plan on how to do it. Do we want to invest the resources in personnel, in finances, to be able to go out and get that done? And if IBM was the type of company that said, if we want to do that, we will do that. And so I realized at every step in my career in athletics, we all have challenges, but I've never feared saying there's no outcome. There is a solution.
Yeah.
You have to engineer that solution. And I've been blessed to work with incredible people that helped us make those solutions happen.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Look at a problem, an idea, map it out, do the research it takes, and decide if you actually want to apply the resources necessary to make that idea happen.
Yep. But
and you've applied that throughout your career? I mean,
every place I've been.
Really?
Right? I worked with an incredible team. The first one that comes to mind is at the University of Miami, right? Chris Freet hired me to be the assistant athletics director for marketing. We were asked to rebuild the University of Miami basketball brand. They had just hired Coach Larinaga, who's still there to this day.
Right.
And I'll be completely honest, this was a really fun thing. I sat down with Chris and the athletics director and the head coach and their staff. And we had big, hairy, audacious goals, right, that we had learned from reading Good to Great. And we said, listen, we're going to sell out 4 home men's basketball games this year. And it was the first thing I put on the first slide. And I promise you, the whole room erupted in laughter.
Wow.
Everyone laughed.
Yeah.
Everyone laughed. Big, hairy, audacious goal. And I promise you, I didn't feel like Jerry Seinfeld where everyone was laughing at my joke. I felt like they were laughing at me and our plan. But then, and like anyone, I had that moment of trepidation where I'm like, did I just bite off way more than I can chew? And then I paused and I went back to that IBM mentality and I said, no, wait a second. Andrew, you did not walk into this room with a wish. You came in with a goal and we had a plan, right? We had incredible people on our staff, Brian Bowser, Chris Freet, Lindy Sparby. We had great people who looked at this in advance and said, if we change the way that we market and promote, if we change the way we price our tickets, if we learn to leverage these incredible home games we have against other great ACC teams, and we build mini plans that we hadn't had before, we can do this. And I got back and got my confidence right back in that moment. And I said, okay, I appreciate your feedback, but here's how we're going to do it. And, in the end, they were right, at least partially. We didn't sell out 4 games. We sold out 5 games that year, right? And so for me, I use that as an example of you can engineer the solution no matter how big the problem is.
So you gave them the roadmap, what it would take, the people it would take, the resources it would take for us to do that in that moment, right?
Yep. And we did it.
That's excellent. I think that's actually very excellent, right? That you keep that with you and you've used that along the way, along the path. You've been in the position you're in for 4 years, Deputy Athletics Director. I wonder about the evolution of that position 4 years on from taking the position and using the philosophy you talked about, engineering solution. Where has that come into play in the role you're in now at Syracuse?
The first thing that comes to mind is COVID.
Right.
Like everybody, we're really proud at Syracuse about our fan attendance, especially for our men's basketball program. People know the now JMA Wireless Dome. We've hosted crowds of up to 35,000 people for our games. But then we had a season where we couldn't have any fans at all. And we had, again, an incredible group of people on our staff who sat down and said, this is basically mission impossible. How do we, create a good fan atmosphere? And we sat down with our corporate sponsorship team and we came up with a way to get all the tarps on the seats, right? To be able to get those corporate partners, logos and brands out there, get the television awareness that they wanted to have, and be able to salvage the season to the best of our ability. And, be able to bring people back in a safe way as we were slowly but surely allowed to bring fans back. I think that's another application of this. It doesn't matter how big the problem is, and that was a huge problem, but we engineered a solution. And, I think back to when I was a kid at my age, you always watched the G.I. Joe cartoons, right? I remember G.I. Joe. And they'd finish the episode, knowing is half the battle, right? And that's what I'm proud of this team and the people I work with. You have to actually accomplish it. It's great that you got the plan, but now you have to go out and execute.
Has there been any other moments, maybe not in this iteration of your career, but in leading past that Miami moment where people looked and like, I don't really know if that's really going to happen, and you had to show them how, and then it actually happened? Has there been any other those type of moments?
You know what? One of my favorite things that I've done in my career is at one point in my career, I left intercollegiate athletics to become the director of athletics at Owego Free Academy, which is where I went to high school.
Oh, really? Okay.
Back in New York. And it was a very unique situation. I felt drawn to be home, to be near my family. And I wanted to help that community where I grew up and give back. And when I arrived at Owego Free Academy, I think a lot of people there thought I was going to be your typical high school athletics director. And for me, I was using it as a way to hone my collegiate athletic director skills.
Really? Okay.
One of the things I did, believe it or not, between 7th grade and 12th grade, we had, I believe, was it 63 or 65 total teams, because you had the modified sports, the freshman sports, junior varsity,
Oh,
and
wow.
varsity.
Yeah.
I did head coaching evaluations for every single coach
Wow. Yeah.
from 7th grade to 12th grade. I enjoyed that process because I think it helped those coaches, and we helped them take this IBM roadmap idea and help them be incredibly successful. And then I got that sport administrator experience that I need and still use to this day. But then we had a situation where there was a huge flood in the town of Owego, in that whole area of New York. And it completely ruined all of our strength training space. And I said, I've got this vision of building what I think would be maybe the best strength training facility for any high school in New York State. I had the plans drawn up. I took it to our board. They reviewed it, and they looked at me like I was just absolutely
just like Miami,
bonkers.
right? They start laughing at you. That's hilarious.
They're like, A, we don't need this. B, you'll never raise enough money to be able to pay for this.
You, weren't they?
And I could just feel that little flame inside going, all right, I love being told it can't be done.
Yeah.
And we found an incredible group who loved our vision, was able to work with some of the teachers who understood that physical education was a great way to be able to, you could use it not only for just the sports, but just for general phys ed for all of the students. And we found the donors. We had to get some help. I leaned on some friends from college athletics who were able to get me some really nice friend pricing at Powerlift. Thank you, Powerlift. They came in and gave us a great price. And I brought it to the board, and I'll never forget the day that I handed it to the superintendent. One check that covered the cost of everything.
Wow.
And he absolutely could not believe was handing him that check.
Really?
And he was like, wow, we're going to do this. I said, yes, sir, we're going to do
we
it.
Are.
And here's the beauty of that, right? It worked. Because for the first time in probably decades, we had student athletes who ended up getting Division I scholarship.
Wow.
Partially as a result of having this incredible strength facility from which they could work. There was a young lady who set a world record in deadlift for her age because she used that facility.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
You know, so that's a lot of fun, right? They go on, they win state championships and do those things.
Did you walk the board through the through the weight room to people who had their doubts?
Everybody did, 100%. You know, and I said you have to do pull-ups for every doubt you have.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I think that's interesting. Walk me through one more time. Engineering a solution. If somebody were writing notes right now,
yep.
What are the steps to doing that?
All right, so the first step is begin with the end in mind.
Okay.
You might recall that that's one of the 7 habits of highly effective people, right? And I learned that while I was at IBM, and we did the Stephen Covey training, which I would encourage everyone, if you haven't read the 7 habits, read it. Go to Covey training. It is absolutely fantastic. You will not regret it. So step 1 is begin with the end in mind. Have a vision for what you want. But then slowly but surely walk yourself through those steps from the end to where you are today. And when I'm sitting like with a head coach, like in a sport administrator type of role, we define where it is we want to go. We talk about the things that have to happen in order to get there. And then we talk about the funding that we need to have in order to make that happen. That's why I'm a big proponent of zero-based budgeting. Mm-hmm. For those of you who haven't done that, it's the concept that you don't hand your coach a budget based on what you did last year with, you know, an additional 3% added in for inflation, but rather what you do is everyone's budget goes back to zero every year, and it is a lot of work, and people don't like doing it. But when you do the zero-based budget, you make an intentional, conscious decision about everything that you are going to purchase and invest in throughout the course of the year. And now you can tie it to those priorities and use it on your roadmap to success.
Right.
So in year 1, You may buy certain things, you make certain investments. Get the success you wanted. Year 2, all right, we're on the plan. Here we go. Year 2. Now we're going to make these other investments. Year 3, we're going to make these other investments. And you should be watching your program grow throughout the process. And believe it or not, then you start to get that momentum. You start seeing these little goals that you had. Check that box. All right, now let's check this box. You got momentum, you got belief, and belief is a force multiplier. Once people around you start kind of seeing the success and knowing it can happen, they get on board, and you'll be surprised at how well you'll be able to get to your end goal.
Next thing you know, you got a brand new weight room or 5 sold out home games, right?
Exactly.
I think that's excellent. I'll ask just a couple more questions, then we'll wrap. The first one, that zero-based budget. So is there a number? And I probably should know this coming out of the MBA program, but is there a number that if you say everything is reset to zero, how much do I know I can spend? Tell me how zero-based budget works in terms of if I'm the coach or if I have a department or something like that. Yeah.
So zero-based budget is on the front end.
Okay.
Right? So at the conclusion of your budget process, you will have a number.
Okay.
And then you'll know what you can spend. And frankly, sometimes things happen, right, where you say, hey, we got to make an expenditure that we didn't anticipate on. But the idea of the zero-based budget
to plan it out
is it forces you to make a conscious decision about what you're buying in advance of the season because it ties to your strategy, right? Whereas if you don't do a zero-based budget, you simply hand your coach, let's say the number was 350,000 last year. You hand them another one. It's now 365,000.
Got it.
And we're just going to spend the same thing. Well, we spent X amount on
things
hotels last year. We're going to do
and try to use it up at the end of the year.
Correct.
If we don't use it all up. I got
Correct.
it now.
And then we all play this game, right? Like, oh, there's $35,000 left in our budget. Should we give it back? No, what are we gonna spend it on, right? But that isn't an intentional way to grow your program. You're just trying to it's almost like you won the lottery and you're just buying something because something might be on sale. Well, that's not a strategy, right? Was it Herm Edwards? It says like a goal without a plan is a wish.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
And so having gone through that process early in my career and not doing the zero-based budgeting and realizing, hey, coach, we're at the end of the year, we got some money left, but we can buy something, but it's not strategic. And so that's my advice for people.
I think that's excellent. The engineering the solution, zero-based budgeting, I think is very interesting to me. But engineering the solution, I appreciate how something at the beginning of your career has stuck with you throughout your career, and you still use it and have tangible examples of how this thing works and how you think about things.
It works.
Yeah,
it
I think
absolutely
that's great.
works.
Andrew, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast. Of course, it got a little loud here. We're at NACDA 2022 here in Las Vegas, but it was a great conversation.
Awesome. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir. That was Andrew Goodrich. He is the Deputy Athletic Director at Syracuse. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.